Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us here on Organizing in the Time of COVID-19. My name is Feroz Manji from Daraja Press. Today we have a couple of really interesting guests. Both are active trade unionists in Scotland, and both have been involved in the issue of Ross. I think you're going to have to be a little quieter.
Sorry.
Both have been involved in active union organizing and have faced serious challenges in organizing around the rising threat of COVID. So I'm really pleased to bring on board our guests. We have Eurig Scandrett. In spite of the way his name is spelt, it's pronounced Eurig. And so welcome, Eurig. And to you, Ross, also a warm welcome. It seems to me, from what I gather, that the UCU, your union, has been involved in a number of disputes around pay and equalities. And in the present context of sort of neoliberal dominance, and in a sense, the hammer of neoliberalism and the rock of COVID is something that you are having to organize on. Can you give us some sort of idea of what has been going on in terms of your union's work?
Yes, thanks, Feroz. UCU has been organizing in the higher education sector in Scotland and across the UK, particularly around so many of the issues that come with neoliberalism, and what the COVID pandemic has exposed is the inequalities and the iniquities that are already existing in the neoliberal system, but also some opportunities for good practice, I think. So it's quite interesting as we're organizing to see where there have been opportunities as well as threats. So we have been fighting for many years, as have many others in the education sector and other sectors, against privatization, the commodification of learning, outsourcing of essential services, the use of new public management techniques, deprofessionalization, micromanagement, using metrics to measure the work that we're doing. And this has been, a long battle. We have been in dispute on a national level just recently over pay and conditions, and a year ago in the branch, we were in dispute over job cuts. But ironically, with the COVID pandemic, we have found at a branch level that suddenly the union is essential to the senior management. We've been involved in many of the discussions. We've had direct line of contact with senior management. And it shows that a university, which should be a public service, should be responsive to social need, and should be run jointly by professional public sector managers and the unions that represent the people at the who are actually delivering the work, that there is a possibility of that happening.
So what particularly has changed that? You said that it was they've discovered that they need the union. Why would they need the union?
I think the senior management there's been a bit a recognition that if they want to know what issues are coming up from the staff and also the students that the staff are in direct contact with, if they want to know what's happening, if they want things to nobody to fall through the net, as it were, and I think often, although senior managers in universities, in many cases, behave as if they're running a private company that they're mostly interested in selling courses, but actually they also are there to support the to depend on the people who are actually doing the delivery, the lecturers, the technicians, the librarians, the cleaners, the administrators. They depend on us, and so we are the eyes and ears on the ground about what's happening when staff are struggling to deliver pieces of work because, for example, the schools are closed and they have children at home, or because issues that may have been hidden in the past, such as mental health issues. Quite often we're the ones as union reps who know about these things, and members speak to us confidentially, and we're able to collectivize them, bring them up directly to the senior management, and they have no other way of knowing a lot of these issues. So it's highlighted just how dependent the university is on the frontline delivery staff across the board, and just how important the union is for tapping into what people are experiencing and then raising it directly with senior management. Workload is a big issue that we've been battling on. We've been battling on workload for a long time, but now this has highlighted just how the kind of pinch points in workload are occurring, where lecturers are putting their teaching and their assessments and student support all online, and there are bottlenecks in that. Now, already built onto the fact that workload is a problem, this is just highlighted. If you work your staff to the limit or close to the limit all the time, if you don't provide enough of a workforce to deliver what we're delivering, then when you get a crisis like this, it exposes the fact that we are close to the edge and something has to be done. So things are now having to be done. There is redistribution of some workload. There is removing of some unnecessary bits of work. It's not perfect, but the communication lines are open in a way that they haven't been for some time.
Can you give us some sort of idea of the nature of the problem in terms of COVID that's faced in Scotland, and perhaps give us an idea of what the Scottish government is, and indeed the UK government policies have been?
Yeah, at the moment we've been under lockdown for about 4 weeks. 4 weeks ago, things were changing very quickly. The Scottish government is responsible for public health, so it makes its own decisions, but that's been well coordinated with the UK government. So we were actually on strike nationally over pay and conditions at the time that the COVID epidemic was started to reach the UK. And our principal asked whether we would be willing to attend business continuity group meetings, and we decided that although we were on strike, this was such an important thing that we would do that. Within a matter of a week, initially the advice was that those who were had underlying health conditions or were experiencing symptoms or whatever would immediately be self-isolated. And then within a matter of days after that, the entire country was asked to stay at home and not go into work. So, and then shortly after that, the campus was closed, de facto closed. There are students living on campus, and so there is a necessary skeleton staff. But there has been a lot of protections put in place so that which avoids there being sort of risk, reduces risk of crossover, reduces risk of infection.
The impression one gets from reading even the British newspapers is a sense of incompetence, self-serving interests by the Tory government, by a lack of concern about those who have been, in fact, especially those who are institutionalized. Is that an impression that's correct?
Yes, I mean, we get the same news bulletins as anybody else in the world, and I mean, it's no secret that the trade unions were very disappointed with the outcome of the last election. That the current government, Tory government, was came in with an agenda which was very much about pursuing the neoliberal line, but also xenophobic messages and using public infrastructure, really investment to kind of buy votes, essentially. So putting money into areas where they had not previously done because they were Labour voting, but they managed to get them to vote Tory. A big push on Brexit and so on. So their interest in actually being well prepared and having a well-funded health service and having a well-funded infrastructure for a national pandemic was not there. The government had been warned plenty of times before that they were not ready for a pandemic, and it's been proved the case. Now, notwithstanding, obviously, our Prime Minister was ill. Nonetheless, the infrastructure after 10 years, more than 10 years of austerity, meant that we were very ill prepared, and the government has demonstrated that it can barely keep up. It keeps changing its mind. It keeps initially this rather strange idea of trying to encourage herd immunity, which was dropped after a couple of days. Ministers not really appearing to know what they're talking about. On the other hand, it's demonstrated that even a Tory government, if necessary, will find money from somewhere to put into the public infrastructure when it's essential. What they have been saying for decades can't be done, they've just done. And they could do the same for tackling poverty. They could do the same for tackling climate change. They could do all these things that the trade union movement and the left generally has been saying for a long time. And the government has been saying that they can't do it without the money. Then they're doing it. They're doing it because of this emergency.
Ross, what's your take on this? I think you're okay.
Yeah.
What's your take on this?
On the whole situation, I mean, I generally agree with everything that Eurig said. Can you hear me okay, yeah?
Yep, you're fine.
Yeah, cool. And I think in terms of what I guess from a trade unionist point of view, it's highlighted that there's elections that are currently unorganised. The topic of this.
You're breaking up.
Sorry. How about now? I'm okay now?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's highlighted that things that we've known for quite a while is really exposed. For example, how exploited the working class is in this country, particularly sections of the working class, including like outsourced workers in the public sector, in universities, for example, cleaners, security staff, janitors, caterers, who are, often a lot of these sectors of the workforce have been outsourced to these private companies who are obviously making profit out of it, or else they wouldn't be doing it. There'd be nothing in it for them if they weren't making profit for it. They're making profit out of essentially out of exploiting this section of the working class. But it's also it's workers who are particularly crucial in this pandemic. It's workers like cleaners, cleaners, security, janitors, people that kind of to some extent need to carry on working, frontline workers, who for quite a while were kind of deemed kind of low skilled. What actually meant was low wage workers, and who often. Not just in universities, public sector in general, they've been outsourced to these companies. The way they make a profit out of it is by cutting back in maternity pay, cutting back on sick pay. So a lot of these workers don't have access to don't have sick pay, or if they do, they maybe get 3 days a year, or they there's all this kind of bureaucratic measures in order to try and stop them from claiming it. So it ends up that they don't have the protection. They have to keep on working, and they don't have a voice. They don't, because it is harder for unions to organise. It's not impossible for unions to organise, but it is a bit harder, or significantly harder. Because there's different layers of bureaucracy and management that you need to go through, and you end up with the public sector, university management, passing the buck to the contractor, who pass the buck back, and end up nobody takes responsibility. There's a bunch of bureaucrats that are getting paid a lot more for this nonsense. But at the end of the day, these workers are being totally exploited. They've proven themselves to be kind of crucial workers in this crisis, and they're kind of being left high and dry by this situation. And I mean, that's the situation.
So what has been happening is that a lot of the frontline workers are just, as part of the neoliberal agenda, just simply farmed out to small companies who then provide these services, paying poor wages to those workers, and the difficulty of organizing, I assume. But has that situation become worse in the time of COVID? What are the implications of that?
I think COVID is. Apologies, I'm not used to sitting down all day, and I've had to learn how to sit down all day during this, and I'm not quite mastered it. So apologies, my squeaky chair keeps making noises. I would probably describe it more as COVID. The pandemic's highlighted it rather than it's highlighted a situation that was already there. And one thing that I'm wary of talking too personally about my experience in organising at my workplace, because it might open me up to get into trouble. But trade unions as a whole, we've been putting forward the idea that if you don't have if you have workers who aren't entitled to sick pay, this is something I have been raising for absolute years. If you have workers that aren't entitled to sick pay, then if they get ill, it's going to cause, it's going to be a risk to other people in the workplace. Regardless of other workers, students, the public who come in. And I always kind of imagined to be somebody with a broken leg might trip, or a sprained ankle might trip over, or somebody with a norovirus, or something like that. But I never, after saying this for years, I never realised it would be proven so right, so correct, that in quite a disturbing way, where we end up with lots of people that aren't entitled to sick pay. And if you're not entitled to sick pay, you're going to come in. It's not a moral question. You can get told all you want that you need to stay at home, but if you can't afford to stay at home, then you're going to end up coming in. I'd go in. If I were in that situation, I would go in, and so would many other people. And it's that situation that is led to a situation, and it's perpetuated the pandemic. It's made it. I'll say this quite clearly. It's led to more deaths. This situation has led to more people dying, and it's made the situation worse. Because if we're in a situation where these workers and workers in general were employed by public bodies, democratically controlled public bodies, then we'd be in a situation where we could pause it for a bit. We wouldn't need to worry about some profiteers, corporations and them kind of making a profit and them lobbying the government to keep the workplaces going, or at least we can make sure that they get decent PPE when they're going in, and there's decent social distancing measures are put in. But that's not, with these outsourcing companies and the private sector in general, that is not the main focus, is it? It's not. I mean, that's not what drives them. It's profit.
I mean, one of the things that has been revealed, I think you're quite right about COVID revealing the nature by which capital operates. But one of the things that become clear, certainly in England, from the data that I've seen, and in the US, this is the case for sure, that it is these poor wages of these actually essential workers these are Black people. These are the exploitation of immigrants, and in some cases migrants. Is that the same case in Scotland? Either of you?
Yes, to some extent. If I could come in there, it is often migrants, Eastern European migrants, or people in many different fragile situations, working class people, are often, yes, it's the most vulnerable, and the most vulnerable who are working for these private companies. I think the other thing that is always the case, but has been exposed because of the COVID situation, is just how fragmented the workforce is. These outsourced companies have multiple work sites, and people get moved around almost as a kind of punishment if they start rocking the boat. Extremely difficult to unionize, and I think Ros is perhaps being he clearly wants to maintain confidentiality, but he's also being very modest about the amazing work that he's been doing, constantly speaking to people who are either not union members because of the fragmented nature and the intimidatory nature of the companies that they work for, or they are union members, but it's extremely difficult for them to actually organize in that sector. Within the university, we have a degree of security, a union recognition. We have quite well organized branches of the unions that are recognized, and so we have been able to represent the interests of these outsourced workers a lot through the work that Ros has been doing, just being on the ground, listening to them, and so knowing the issues as they come up. And it's probably raised an important issue for the trade union movement. There is a tendency sometimes amongst trade unions to represent only their own members, which often further fragments and alienates the kind of workers we're talking about: outsourced workers, casualized workers, people on 0 hours contracts, people with no or very limited annual leave provision or sick pay or whatever. So there is a point of leverage with a relatively well-organized sector to actually try and speak on behalf and represent the interests of those who are more fragmented.
I mean, and are these casual workers predominantly women?
They are. I mean, it depends on the sector. I mean, the security sector is more often men. Catering, more women. Cleaning, more women. But yes, disproportionately women, but not entirely. It's often quite a gender segregated workforce. But also sometimes these. The jobs we've discovered again before the coronavirus, but people are employed for one thing and then they're asked to do another thing, and because of the insecurity of their situation, they're moved around. So disproportionately women, but certainly not entirely. But often, but nearly all from quite fragile sectors of the economy.
So when these women go out to work to do this casual labor, I mean, presumably they have families. So who's looking after people at home? Is it the men who are doing that, or actually is it some other way in which they get support?
Right.
Yeah.
To be honest, just from one experience, about cleaners in particular, my experience, these outsourced companies are more likely to be women. As Eurig said, in security tend to be more likely to be men. I mean, there's a lot of single mothers, young single mothers who, and to be honest, it's I often, when speaking to them, in the work leading up to this, I didn't go into that much detail about that. I didn't. But I have heard that. I mean, one of the issues is particularly poorer people from poorer backgrounds, working class backgrounds, is they end up relying on their grandparents more often, which has extra issues when it comes to this virus. Because particularly if you're over 70, is likely to croak you, to get you. And I think quickly a point on, because there was an issue saying that people with BME, people of colour in Britain, I think in the US as well, and likely in Canada, but people of colour in Britain were more likely to die of COVID-19 for a range of reasons. One big reason was, the NHS is very much dependent on, because of the time period in which it was formed. It kind of coincided with the time when workers from Africa, from the ex-colony, India, Africa, and other ex-colonies were moving over, and it still is still is a lot of people of colour working for NHS, but also as we as Eurig said, I think in Scotland in particular, there's a lot of Eastern European migrants that work for agencies. It adds to the exploitation. Often, if you're from a migrant community, you're less likely to speak up. There's often, I spoke to one worker who's from elsewhere, from outside EU, and he said he would have to go to work, for visa-related reasons, in order to earn enough money, and so that's regardless if they were sick or not, and it's also agencies in particular, they very much exploit they actually say, and I've seen it on their websites, and they've said that that they're actually kind of looking for Eastern European workers or migrant workers, because they know they work harder often, because if you're in a more desperate situation, you're less likely to speak up. I would say I think one sort of benefit of this is not benefit of this situation, but one thing it has made it a lot harder for the kind of usual kind of whistleblowing kind of far right voices to get much resonance in the UK. I'm not saying that they've got completely gone, but when you've got the frontline workers who are, a lot of the time more likely to be migrant workers, or NHS workers, or more likely to be migrant workers or BME workers, then it does make it a lot harder for these voices to gain as much authority. Not to say they won't be gaining authority, but I think it is. I guess it's a, it has, and I think it's there has, generally speaking, been a lot more respect shown to workers or low wage workers. They're kind of I'd say there's been a rise in class consciousness in a way. It's not been a simple way. There's also been quite a kind of patriotic mood developing. When Boris Johnson was ill, there was quite a lot of people kind of people naturally felt quite sorry for him. It's not, and the Queen's speech was received a bit. I noticed that myself. People that are normally a bit more sceptical of the monarchy were still kind of quite pleased to see the Queen speaking. And I think that there's inevitably a bit of a kind of patriotic kind of feeling around this crisis. The government keep going on in this kind of war metaphor. However, at the same time, there's been quite a lot of kind of class consciousness developing. I think a lot of people are very, and this is something that I noticed when we were campaigning. When you're trying to when you're trying to put forward the idea that these outsourcing companies are playing a parasitic role, they're playing a negative role, a difficult thing to persuade people around to. I think this situation has made it more obvious, and I guess more widely, we've seen a lot of kind of anger and hatred shown towards people like Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, or Tim Martin, the guy that owned Wetherspoons. I don't know if Wetherspoons exist in Canada, but he's a big billionaire. And there's a lot of kind of hatred shown towards them, who've proven themselves to be kind of useless in this situation. And there's a lot of respect shown towards, kind of low wage workers like cleaners, etc. And of course NHS workers. And I think just to finish, to make a point in this is quite, even though there's a lot of difficulties in this situation, it also, that is, I guess, one positive. It will make things a bit easier for trade unionists and left-wingers, socialists in general, to put forward their views in a confident way. We'll get quite a good hearing in this situation.
I mean, the unfortunate reputation of the labour movement in the UK has always been to see BME, the black and minority ethnic communities, taking jobs as being a threat to them, that they are taking jobs away from the British worker. Is that going to change? Is that you see this greater class consciousness, this potential solidarity with groups who are predominantly in the outsourced sector? Do you see that changing? Either of you, Eurig?
I think it had started changing actually before COVID. To be honest, I think that there is a xenophobic trend, but I think within the labour movement there has been a lot of opposition to that xenophobia, and I think the labour movement is an area where in recent times there has been a lot of anti-racist work, a lot of recognition of the particularly exploited sectors of the either the migrant or the black and minority ethnic working class. So I would not be as critical of the British labour movement in recent times. That it has had a history where there maybe has been some of that, but not so much more recently. I think.
Can I put an argument to you, which I've heard in relation to Brexit, that Brexit was and that's the big crisis that preceded COVID, was essentially something around migration, something around racism, and that it was the failure of the Labour Party itself to understand the depth of racism, that it is such a profound part of especially English consciousness, that the result of the elections was in a sense predetermined because it was the race card that was played. How would you respond to that?
It's slightly beyond my remit as a true junior organizer. My own view is that the Labour Party, which wasn't robust enough at challenging the racism and sat a bit on the fence of actually saying, yes, we do need to control migration because it saw its core supporters coming up with that, and not really being able to get down to what the real issues are, which was actually not about race at all. It was a dominant narrative that the Labour Party found difficult and possibly didn't put enough effort into challenging. I think perhaps grassroots trade union organising were doing some of that, but we could always have done more. So yes, that could be one aspect. Of course, there were a lot of vested interests that were attempting to derail the possibility of a Corbyn government, both within the Labour Party and outside it. And a major issue was, of course, the completely the pro-Israel lobby, the kind of the throwing accusations of anti-Semitism, which, with any kind of scratching of the surface, found that there was hardly any there. That certainly no more than in any other part of any other institution. But it was part of the dominant narrative, which helped to derail Corbyn.
Ross, what's your take on that?
Well, that was a big question. I'll attempt to answer it. I think what your analysis of the British Labour movement, particularly the history of the British Labour movement, has truth in it, and we shouldn't hide that. There have been problems with the British Labour movement, and there's resistance to organising Black and Asian workers in the 60s and 70s, and a lot of that, in a lot of these cases, for example, particularly around the textiles workers in the north of England, which employed a lot of South Asians, because who kind of pushed their way through, and kind of broke through that kind of the sort of xenophobic aspects of the trade union bureaucracy at the time, and at points, I don't know if it's the case anymore, but at points, like, you're more likely to be a trade union activist if you're of colour, a person of colour. I think that was a point in the early 80s. And there's the Grunwick strike in London, which was obviously a big kind of turning point, not just because there's these kind of very exploited Indian women that were working, and then trade unions from all over United Kingdom went over to who were predominantly white at the time, joined in, showed solidarity, and it was a big step forward for class consciousness in the UK. And there's various, for example, the Labour movement played a big role in obviously the Battle of Cable Street in the 1930s, but the Battle of Lewisham as well, I think in the late 70s, which was a fight against the National Front. It was very much trade unions played a big role in organising around that. And they should do. I think there's likely more things they can do. And I think the situation with Brexit, there's no doubt there was a kind of xenophobic aspects of that, and that's what happens if well, firstly, if for years and years you've got after deindustrialisation, public sector drain, and just working class communities left to dry, and plus you've got a mass media which is just telling you that this is the fault of migrants, this is the fault of Muslims, this is eventually that does result in a situation where people do turn to xenophobic to xenophobic ideas, and of course, don't deny that at all. I would say that this consciousness is reversible. I think it doesn't need, people can change. I've seen people change. I've seen people come up with quite backwards kind of reactionary ideas. People and then kind of change, and then change their mind on it. And I think is the role of the labour movement, which I think I think when it came to freedom of movement, they had the wrong position. I think we should always call for the freedom of movement, migrants. The position that the labour movement, sorry, not the labour movement, but the anti-migrant position, which was a kind of old, I think it came from maybe a bit of a relic, which is the idea that if you have migrants working, then it's going to, often it's even framed in a way you in order to defend these migrants, you need to make sure that you don't want them to come over here and be exploited. The problem is, if you're campaigning for migrant controls, you're going to end up in a situation where the migrant workers who are living in the country, it's not going to stop them from living here. It just means they're under more restrictions. It means that their citizenship is more tied to their residency, their marriage, their job, their employer. It gives the landlords and employers, etc., more power. And I think this is something that I think people that are advocating migrant controls fail to understand. People on the left and the labour movement fail to understand. And I think, I guess my last point in this is with Brexit and just general, I think there's a tendency for kind of anti-racism to be tackled from a liberal point, which is what was done a bit with the Remain campaign. And it was led by liberals. The EU is the EU is a capitalist institution, which also has done some horrendous things to refugees. We can't rely on the EU to be leading the anti-racism movement. And in order, at the end of the day, if you want to trade unionists, if you want to be persuading workers away from any kind of racist or xenophobic ideas, we need to be putting forward a solution, to make sure there is jobs for everybody. Because these things that migrants get the blame for, the blame of the capitalist system, the bosses, lack of jobs, unemployment, a drain in public services, a drain in housing, even crime, all these things that migrants get blamed for, it's the bosses that are at fault with it, and we need to be putting forward that position. And I think, and that's where the Labour Party went wrong, in my opinion, and it's where the trade unions need to pick up on.
No, good point. I mean, in a sense, almost inevitable, given that both of you work in Scotland. The last elections suggested there was a momentum growing under Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP for an autonomy, for greater autonomy or independence, whatever you want to call it, for Scotland. Has the COVID situation increased, decreased, or had no effect on that?
It's difficult to tell because we're all there is almost no news other than COVID, and at the moment the plan for a second referendum on Scottish independence has been shelved for obvious reasons, and there has been by necessity a great deal of attempts at cooperation between the nations of the United Kingdom. Not all of it has been very successful, but there has been certainly attempts to coordinate on that. So I think it's very much speculation, but I think probably the degree of incompetence in the UK government seems to be exceeding. In Scotland, there seems to be a degree of competence. There's been some big mistakes, but it may well not do any harm to the independence movement. But if I may kind of come back to the kind of higher education sector that we're organising in, because I think in Scotland. Undergraduate fees are paid by the state, so it's different from in England. But one of the things about the COVID situation that is also exposed is when we were talking earlier about the fragile workers, the 0 hours workers, the casualized contracts. That's a lot of our students. A lot of our students, even though their fees are paid, in order to make ends meet, in order to feed themselves, in order to pay the rent, they are working in this gig economy. They're working in this, and so many of the students I'm in touch with now have suddenly found they have no income. There have been students who have been threatened with eviction from their tenancies because they have no income. The 0 hours contracts have just completely dried up. At the same time, a lot of the health workers in social care in particular, working with the elderly, are on 0 hours contracts, on very fragile contracts. And there are students as well. So some of them are finding they're working a lot more and are unable to complete their coursework. It shows the nature of higher education. And as trade unionists, I think this is something that we need to take very, very seriously. We have attempted at various times in our branch to raise the issue of trade union organizing amongst students who are working in that casualized sector. And I think the COVID-19 situation, which has thrown a spotlight on it, is another opportunity that we need to be working on.
In the US, there is a growing movement of refusing to pay rent strikes, even refusing to pay mortgage, and so on. Do you see there's something happening in Scotland?
Is that in relation to COVID?
Well, yes, it's really beginning to happen now. We interviewed Kalia Kuno about this a little while ago, and it does seem to be May the 1st is being used as an opportunity to launch this campaign on a much broader scale. Are you seeing anything similar happening in Scotland?
I haven't seen any of that. I mean, what I have seen is the what I said earlier about the university where we're employed has actually responded quite well as a public institution and has provided some accommodation in the halls of residence for students who are been losing their private rented accommodation, made homeless. So the university has stepped down as a public institution for that, and it shows that universities can be decent public institutions. They don't have to be neoliberal privatizing institutions, the way which is the direction of travel for several decades. So let's hope that lesson is continued.
Well, absolutely. It's been a really interesting discussion with both of you. Ros, thank you for joining us on the show. Eurig also, thank you for joining us on this show. Any last words you'd like to put out to those people who are watching quickly?
I suppose that last point that I make, that there is a lot of difficulties faced by the COVID-19, difficulties in organizing, but it has also highlighted where good things can be done, where public institutions can behave well, where trade unions can, when we get access to those who are making decisions, we are actually able to make a difference. So let's hope that continues after the height of the pandemic.
Ros?
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, thanks for allowing me to speak in this, and I guess it's always just a pleasure to be interviewed for something that's, as you said, being broadcasted to people around the world and trade unionists around the world. So I guess I'd like to finish by saying, this is, even though this is a very worrying time, as I said earlier on, there's a lot of people scrutinising their leaders, scrutinising the capitalist system, and there's a lot of people are becoming more class conscious. And I think as trade unionists, as left wingers, as socialists, it's time to be very bold. It's time to. Often we can be quite conservative with a small c. You're not don't want to say anything to rock the boat, but this is a time to really start talking about. And putting forward ideas of a democratically planned economy and internationalism, because this is a shared experience. Some countries and some places in the global south, as you say, will be experiencing it a lot worse, but there is a lot of things that we're experiencing it as a class, as a working class throughout the world, I would say. We should use this opportunity during this time, if we can, we should be trying to organise, and we should be putting forward a bold socialist programme. That's it. Thanks.
Well, it's interesting. When we interviewed somebody last week, Kumbature from Senegal, her central message was, it's time to be audacious. It's time to be courageous, which is mimicking Samir Amin, one of Africa's leading economists who died last year, who wrote Audacity and More Audacity. I hope that's the message that we all need to consider seriously. Thank you once again for joining us, Eurig and Ros, and we wish you well and in the struggles that you're facing. Thank you.
Thanks for just.
Thank you. That was Eurig and Ros talking from Scotland. And this afternoon we will be probably we'll be recording it because video contact is rather difficult to Cuba. But we'll be talking to Emilia Fernandez about the situation in Cuba, both from the point of view of the internationalism shown by Cuba, but also in terms of how popular organizing is happening in Cuba in relation to COVID. So please tune in later today on our website at Daraja Press. This is wishing you a safe and a safe day, and be well. Spiros Manji signing off.